a man who played one of the most powerful consigliere figures in film history. Robert Duvall spent his final moments far from Hollywood lights and red carpets. Instead of a mansion filled with industry voices, his last breath came on a quiet farm in Fauquier County, where rolling hills and grazing horses framed the peaceful landscape he had chosen decades earlier. On the evening of February 15, 2026, inside a historic Georgian stone farmhouse, his wife Luciana Pedraza held his hand as he passed at the age of 95. There were no cameras, no dramatic announcements prepared in advance, only a calm room and a life closing in the same understated tone that had defined his personality. Within hours, major outlets such as CNN, NBC, and PBS carried the news across the world. Yet the statement released by his family surprised many. Instead of organizing a grand Hollywood memorial, they asked people to honor him by watching a meaningful film, sharing stories, or simply taking a quiet drive through the countryside. That request reflected a truth about Duvall that long time. Collaborators already understood he had spent his entire career resisting the spectacle of fame. Despite building a fortune estimated between $50 and $70 million across 7 decades, he never lived like a celebrity in the traditional sense. He owned expansive rural property rather than flashy city estates, invested carefully instead of chasing extravagant deals, and selected roles based on artistic conviction rather than paycheck size. When he died, he left no biological children, no complicated inheritance disputes, and no public legal battles. Instead, his wealth and legacy were expected to pass primarily to Pedraza, the woman he met unexpectedly in a bakery in Buenos Aires nearly 3 decades earlier, an encounter so unlikely it sounded like something written for the screen. Duvall's journey began long before Hollywood recognized him. Born on January 5, 1931, in San Diego, he grew up in a disciplined military household led by his father, a Navy Rear Admiral, while his mother quietly nurtured a love for theater. Frequent relocations shaped his childhood, leaving him adaptable, but restless. Acting entered his life almost accidentally when he enrolled in drama courses simply to remain in college and avoid the draft during the Korean War era. What began as a practical decision soon revealed a powerful natural ability. After graduating and briefly serving in the Army, he moved to New York City to study under renowned acting teacher Sanford Meisner at the Neighborhood Playhouse. There he formed friendships with future stars like Dustin Hoffman, Gene Hackman, and James Caan, all of whom struggled financially while chasing their dreams. His breakthrough came in 1962 when he appeared as Boo Radley in To Kill a Mockingbird, delivering a performance with minimal dialogue yet remarkable emotional impact. Among those who noticed was director Francis Ford Coppola, who remembered Duvall's presence nearly a decade later while casting The Godfather. Duvall was chosen to play Tom Hagen, the calm and calculating consigliere to the Corleone family. The role earned him an Academy Award nomination despite a modest salary of just $36,000. His restrained performance became one of the defining elements of the film's dramatic balance. He returned for The Godfather Part 2, but declined to appear in The Godfather Part 3 after a pay dispute with the studio, which offered significantly less compensation than that of co-star Al Pacino. The decision cost him millions but reinforced his reputation for prioritizing fairness and principle. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Duvall deliberately avoided being typecast. In Apocalypse Now, he portrayed the unforgettable Lieutenant Colonel Bill Kilgore, delivering one of cinema's most quoted performances. That same era brought critical acclaim for The Great Santini, a role reflecting elements of his own upbringing. However, his defining achievement arrived with Tender Mercies, where he played a struggling country singer seeking redemption. Duvall insisted on performing the music himself, earning the Academy Award for Best Actor. During his acceptance, he expressed admiration not for Hollywood figures, but for country legends Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, and Waylon Jennings, illustrating, again, where his artistic heart truly lived. Television audiences later embraced him in Lonesome Dove, a sweeping Western story he often described as one of his favorite projects. Years later, he invested his own money to produce The Apostle, a deeply personal film that nearly drained his finances but ultimately succeeded critically and commercially. Even into his 80s, he continued delivering powerful performances, including his Oscar-nominated role in The Judge, across more than 130 films. His career reflected consistency rather than sudden financial peaks, allowing his fortune to grow steadily through royalties and careful investments. Away from the screen, Duvall built a lifestyle centered on privacy and authenticity. He purchased farmland in rural Virginia, transforming it into a peaceful retreat where he raised horses and converted a barn into a tango hall after developing a passion for Argentine dance. The property symbolized his deliberate separation from Hollywood culture. Rather than attending constant industry events, he preferred quiet evenings, storytelling, and music. He and Pedraza also supported humanitarian efforts through charitable work focused on education and healthcare for disadvantaged communities. Duvall married 4 times throughout his life, each relationship representing a different stage of his personal evolution. Despite these marriages, he never had biological children, though he once helped raise stepchildren. When asked about it, later in life, he acknowledged that his devotion to acting often consumed the time and emotional space that parenthood requires. By the time he settled into lasting companionship with Pedraza, his priorities had shifted towards stability and shared passions rather than expanding a family. Following his passing, the absence of inheritance disputes stood out in stark contrast to many celebrity estates. Under Virginia law, a surviving spouse typically inherits the estate when no direct descendants exist, making Pedraza the primary beneficiary of his wealth. Yet those closest to him emphasized that the emotional impact of his loss had nothing to do with finances. The grief came from the absence of his presence, the storyteller at the table, the quiet observer on the porch, the man who valued authenticity above recognition. Tributes soon arrived from across the film industry. Actors, directors, and collaborators spoke about his discipline and subtlety, including remarks from Viola Davis praising his emotional depth. Coppola described him as essential to some of the most influential films ever made, while colleagues recalled his humility despite decades of acclaim. One personal memory often repeated involved a letter he treasured from Marlon Brando, which he once said meant more to him than his Oscar statue. That sentiment captured his philosophy. Respect from peers mattered more than public applause. In the end, Robert Duvall's legacy was never defined by the size of his estate or the number of awards on his shelf. It lived in the characters he brought to life, the risks he took for storytelling, and the quiet personal choices that shaped his final years. The farmhouse remained, the tango hall stood still, and the landscapes he loved continued unchanged. But for those who knew him, the true inheritance he left behind was something far more lasting than wealth, a reminder that a life guided by principle, patience, and authenticity can leave a deeper mark than fame ever could.